Upon first release, Doggy Style shot right to the top of the charts, and it was the biggest selling hip-hop album ever. True story. Today for New Music Monday, we're going to check out the brand new album from Snoop Dogg, and it's called Bush. This is Snoop's first album since 2013's Reincarnated, and it's his first hip-hop album since 2011, but it's mostly hip-hop. We'll get to that. After more than 20 years at the top of the rap game, Snoop Dogg can do pretty much whatever he wants musically, and over the last few years, he's been proving that. Whether he's hanging out with Willie Nelson, he's doing full-on reggae albums, or all of those other non-hip-hop things that he's been doing over the last few years, Snoop sees that there's no limit for what he can do musically, and he's enjoying every second of it. Now, Pharrell Williams produced this album, and if there's one thing this record tells us for sure, it's that Pharrell is still in the exact same headspace that he was all the way back in 2013 when he was working with Daft Punk. That is to say, in nearly every single song on this album, musically, it borders on that disco, retro, soul era throwback sound. Don't get me wrong, the beats and the sounds on this album are great, but for the most part, a lot of them really feel like they were just unused tracks from the last Daft Punk record. Again, not a bad thing. At the same time though, you can really see these songs as Snoop giving a very clear nod to a lot of the music that he grew up with and a lot of the music that inspired him, especially in his early years. Whether it's a nod to P-Funk on the song This City, or Anita Ward on the song Awake, or Patrice Rushen on the track So Many Pros, almost every single one of these songs has a send-up to a funk, soul, or disco classic. Also, I think Pharrell Williams might have a serious addiction problem to that Marvin Gaye "Oh" sample that the lawsuit over Blurred Lines was held over, because it's pretty prominent on the song's opening track, and you'd think after that lawsuit he would have learned his lesson. But that's addiction for you. More to the point, for a Snoop album, there's not a lot of Snoop Dogg going on anywhere on the record. In a lot of ways, this feels like a Pharrell Williams album, and Snoop was just contributing guest vocals here and there throughout. It was like Snoop was just sitting in the studio, smoking weed, and listening to Pharrell make music, and whenever he felt like it, he went up, got in front of the microphone, and dropped a couple lines. Now that might very well be what happened, but the reality is it makes these songs sound unfinished vocally, and that really rarely happens when you're working with Snoop Dogg. That being said, if you're into this sort of music from beginning to end, these songs are as smooth as you're gonna find anywhere. I loved it. You get those classic roller rink feels in some places, disco feels in some places, and some great chill out tones in other places. And honestly, there are also a few tracks that sound like background music for video games, not from the 8-bit era, kind of like a Grand Theft Auto radio station. You guys know what I mean. There's also a bit of the classic G-Funk sound that we haven't heard from Snoop in way too long on the track Edibles. But when you listen to it in context, that song doesn't fit with the rest of the album musically. And T.I.'s verse there's no way around it. It's outright weak. The idea that he goes after on that verse has been done to death, and you can find much better examples of it all over the place. It's just not up to par. I don't know any other way to say it. I feel like when you listen to the singles and then the whole album, it was a bait and switch for this record. The sound on the singles is almost nothing like the rest of the album, and it plays like they're great songs from a different album. I feel like they did these songs and they put them on here just to try and move copies because they knew the bulk of this album wasn't going to really appeal to a large audience. Just listen to the first and last tracks. They're really good bookends to a different record. I will say I love the harmonica on California Roll, and Snoop's vocal blends so perfectly that it's the sort of track you can put on with your grandma and you can both enjoy it. Even if the hook does get beaten to death, but hooks getting beaten to death is what you get with Pharrell Williams, and it's never been more obvious than on this album. The bridge and the choruses are overdone on almost every single song, and in the end, that ends up making the lack of verses even more obvious. It's also reflected in the music, because almost every single song overstays its welcome. It just goes on way too long. That also causes a lot of these songs to blend together. There's really not much differentiating one from the other, and I had to go back and look and see where I was in the album because it was just this muddled mess. It was most apparent between the songs Are You a Freak and Awake. I honestly didn't know where one track changed to the other until I really listened carefully, and it wasn't a good thing. Also, just one note on the song Awake. The planet Krypton was a planet first off, so there are no moon rocks there. Also, it was destroyed, so I doubt there are any freaks left, even for Snoop Dogg. But in the end, it came down to the last two tracks on this album that left the worst taste in my mouth. Gwen Stefani is totally underutilized on her appearance on the album, and to tell you the truth, she contributes so little, you might as well have just put any singer on there. You didn't have to pay the big bucks that Gwen most likely got. And in that nothing that she contributes, the vocals are so awkward for both of them that it's almost laughable. But unsurprisingly, it's Rick Ross who wins the award for the most out-of-place vocal on this entire record. His verse completely ruins the last track on the album, but I guess if you're Rick Ross, you're kind of used to ruining songs. It's just the wrong voice and the wrong delivery style for this track. It doesn't fit in at all. And I was also disappointed that we didn't get more from Kendrick Lamar on the same track. It was perfect for his sound. Much like Gwen, totally underutilized, and there was tons of musical space that he could have worked in. In the end, I feel like anybody could have made this record. There was nothing definitively really Snoop Dogg about it anywhere aside from the fact that Snoop is on a couple of the tracks. It doesn't seem like he's a featured artist. It sounds like he's doing guest spots on somebody else's record. He just happens to be doing guest spots on every song, but mostly just singing random words. The music from Pharrell is definitely cool, but only if you're into this recent explosion of disco and soul throwbacks that have happened all over hip-hop music. If you are, you're gonna dig this one. If not, you're probably gonna want to steer clear because that's all there really is here. So there it is, the new album from Snoop Dogg. What do you guys think of this record? What did you like? What didn't you like? Do you even think Snoop Dogg is still relevant in 2015? Hop down in the comments and let me know what you guys think. As always, you can follow me on Twitter and Facebook right here, and I'll see you guys again next time.